In 2010, a welder in Hawthorne, California accepted a job offer that his friends told him was career suicide. The company had already blown up 3 rockets on live television. The CEO was a South African maniac who slept on the factory floor and publicly stated the probability of success was maybe 10%. The welder's brother-in-law, an accountant at a stable manufacturing firm, pulled him aside at a family barbecue and said the words that now echo through financial history: "You're throwing away your pen." The welder took the job anyway, accepted stock options instead of a higher base salary, and spent the next decade watching colleagues quit for Boeing and Lockheed Martin, while he welded aluminum. When SpaceX filed paperwork for its initial public offering, that welder's equity position was worth just under $1 million. He was one of 4,400 employees who became millionaires. 400 of them crossed the $100 million threshold. The intern who fetched coffee in 2009 walked away with shares that could buy a small island. The engineer who was told by her professor that private spaceflight was a joke retired at 34. And the accountant brother-in-law still brings it up at every single family gathering, because the gap between what the world mocks and what the world later envies is the only financial pattern that has repeated with This pattern is not about rockets. It is not about cars. It is about the moment when a large group of people looks at something that defies their mental model of how the world works and decides collectively and confidently that it is ridiculous. The mockery is the signal. The laughter is the data point. And the specific thing being mocked almost never matters because the underlying mechanism is always identical. The crowd evaluates based on what currently exists, while the people getting rid. I have been collecting these moments in a scrapbook for years, not because I have any special insight into rocket science or automotive engineering, but because I noticed a recurring fork, and the outcomes diverge so violently that the people on the wrong side of the bet spend the rest of their lives constructing elaborate narratives to explain why their skepticism was actually wisdom. The cybercab moment is happening right now, and the noise is so loud that most people cannot hear the signal underneath it. Let me tell you what the world saw when Tesla unveiled the cybercab. The world saw a small vehicle with 2 seats and no steering wheel. The world saw gull-wing doors opening upward, like a DeLorean had mated with a toaster. The world saw no rear window, no pedals, no driver controls at all, and the collective reaction was instantaneous and brutal. Automotive journalists called it a 2-seat joke. Social media erupted with comparisons to golf carts and amusement park rides. The phrase, "Who asked for this?" trended for approximately 6 hours. Industry analysts who had spent their careers evaluating vehicles based on horsepower and leather quality looked at the cybercab and saw absence. They saw everything it did not have. They saw a product that violated every rule of what a car should be, and because their job is to evaluate cars against other cars, they concluded that this was not a car at all, but a concept art. This is the exact moment when the pattern activates. This is the moment when the crowd's confidence is highest and their accuracy is lowest. This is the moment when the welder's brother-in-law pulls someone aside and says the thing that will haunt him for 20 years. The thing the crowd missed is so obvious in retrospect that it almost feels unfair to point it out. Eric, the cybercab's lead engineer, stated during the unveiling that approximately 80% of vehicle trips involve 2 passengers or fewer. This is not a marketing claim. This is not a spin. This is a measurement of how human beings actually move through the world. The average car on the road right now has 5 seats and carries 1.2 people per trip. We are hauling 3.8 empty seats everywhere we go, burning fuel to transport air and upholstery, paying for steel and glass and manufacturing complexity that serves no function. The 5-seat sedan is not an engineering response to human need. It is a cultural inheritance from an era when families were larger, carpooling was more common, and the idea of a vehicle designed around actual usage patterns would have been considered bizarre. The cybercab's 2-seat configuration is not minimalism. It is precision. It is a vehicle designed for the statistical shape of human movement, rather than the imagined shape of human aspiration. But the engineering story goes deeper, and this is where the physics part of the pattern becomes undeniable. EPA certification documents reveal specifications that should have dominated headlines, but instead disappeared beneath the wave of mockery. The cybercab is front-wheel drive. It produces 219 horsepower. It weighs 3,113 pounds. And the number that should have stopped every automotive journalist mid-sentence is this. It achieves an EPA equivalent all-electric range of 418 miles, with a highway range of 370. Let me put that in context without getting too technical, because the context is what matters here. The base Model 3 has a larger battery. The base Model 3 weighs less in some configurations, and the Cybercab goes further on less energy. This is not an incremental improvement. This is a step change in efficiency that implies either a fundamental advance in powertrain engineering or an aerodynamic design so clean that it effectively cheats the physics of drag. The crowd saw a funny little pod with 2 seats. The engineers saw a vehicle that extracts more range from less battery than anything in its class, and they understood immediately that this was not a concept car. This was a production vehicle hiding in plain sight, wearing a costume that the mainstream was not equipped to recognize. The interior details tell the same story from a different angle. The Cybercab's cabin allows passengers to stretch their legs further forward than in many sedans, which means the 2-seat configuration is not a compromise but a liberation. By eliminating the rear seats, the engineers gained packaging freedom that 5-seat vehicles cannot access. The result is a vehicle that can accommodate multiple large suitcases, golf bags, bicycles, and foldable wheelchairs simultaneously. A vehicle designed for 2 people carries more cargo than many vehicles designed for 5. This is the kind of optimization that only becomes visible when you stop asking, what does a car look like, and start asking, what do people actually do with their vehicles? The wheelchair accommodation is particularly telling because it reveals that someone on the engineering team was thinking about use cases that the automotive press never considers. Ride-hailing vehicles need to serve passengers with mobility devices. Taxis need to handle luggage for airport runs. The Cybercab's cargo capacity is not a happy accident. It is a specification driven by the requirements of a fleet vehicle that will spend its life picking people up and dropping them off. And the fact that this is not obvious to everyone looking at it. The manufacturing story is where the parallel with SpaceX becomes almost too perfect to be coincidence. The Cybercab is designed for what Tesla calls unbox manufacturing, a production approach that abandons the century-old assembly line model in favor of modular construction, where sections of the vehicle. This is the automotive equivalent of how SpaceX builds rockets, where the focus is not on incremental refinement of traditional processes, but on questioning whether the traditional process. When SpaceX started welding rocket bodies in a tent instead of a cleanroom, the aerospace industry laughed. When Tesla started building cars in a tent next to the Fremont factory, the automotive industry laughed. Both tents produced vehicles that worked. Both tents were temporary solutions to permanent problems of conventional manufacturing. And both tents taught the companies things about production speed that the established players still have not internalized. The unboxed manufacturing system for the Cybercab is not a cost-cutting measure. It is a bet that the way cars have been built for 100 years is wrong, and if that bet pays off, the unit economics of the Cybercab will make vehicles built on traditional lines look like handcraft. This brings me on to the part of the pattern that most people never see because they are too busy participating in the mockery to notice where the money is flowing. The SpaceX IPO did not just make employees rich. It created a new class of wealth that did not exist before, concentrated in people who were explicitly told they were making a mistake. The welder's story is not unique. It is representative. Every early SpaceX employee had the same conversation with the same skeptical relative at the same barbecue. Every one of them was told that stable jobs at established companies were the smart play. Every one of them watched colleagues leave for safer bets. And every one of them who stayed long enough to vest their equity woke up one morning to discover that their net worth had added digits they had never seriously expected to see. The pattern is not that some people get lucky and some people do not. The pattern is that certain types of bets on physics over opinion, bets on engineering reality over cultural consensus, bets on what can be built rather than what has been built before, the median outcome might be failure. SpaceX almost went bankrupt multiple times. The expected value calculation that the welder's brother-in-law was making was not wrong on its own terms. He was just solving for the wrong variable. He was optimizing for probability of success, when the correct variable to optimize for was magnitude of success conditional on the company not dying. The Cybercab is facing the exact same dynamic right now, and the mockery is the tell. The 2-seat configuration that the public finds ridiculous is an engineering response to the fact that approximately 80% of trips involve 2 people or fewer. The 418-mile range from a small battery pack is an efficiency achievement that the automotive press should be dissecting frame by frame. The cargo capacity that accommodates wheelchairs and bicycles and golf bags is a fleet vehicle specification hiding in plain sight. The unboxed manufacturing approach is the same pattern of questioning fundamental assumptions that made SpaceX rockets cheaper than anyone thought possible. And the public reaction is the same laughter that echoed through the aerospace industry when a startup with 3 explosions on its resume claimed it would land rockets on boats. The laughter is not evidence that the thing being laughed at is wrong. The laughter is evidence that the thing being laughed at is difficult to understand, and difficulty to understand is the only reliable moat that exists in any market anywhere. I want to be careful here because I am not telling you to buy anything or invest in anything. I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. What I am doing is pointing at a pattern that has repeated so many times across so many industries that ignoring it requires active effort. The pattern is this: when a group of people who have studied physics and engineering make a bet that contradicts what the general public considers obvious, the general public is almost not because the general public is stupid, but because the general public evaluates new things by comparing them to old things, and the entire point of a step change is that it cannot be evaluated. The Cybercab is not a worse car. It is not a car at all, in the traditional sense. It is a vehicle designed for a world where driving yourself is not the default, where fleet economics dominate retail economics, where efficiency per passenger mile matters more than zero. The fact that this distinction is lost on most people is not a bug. It is the feature that creates the opportunity. The SpaceX employees who became millionaires did not become millionaires because they understood rocket science better than the general public. They became millionaires because they understood that the general public's opinion about rocket science has zero correlation with the physics of orbital mechanics. A rocket either reaches orbit or it does not. The number of people who thought it would fail has no bearing on the trajectory. The Cybercab either achieves its efficiency targets and serves its fleet purpose, or it does not. The number of automotive journalists who think it looks weird has no bearing on whether the engineering works. This is the choice that the pattern keeps offering, and it is the same choice every time. You can bet on the thing that is true regardless of how many people believe it, or you can bet on the consensus and hope that this time the crowd is right. The crowd was wrong about SpaceX. The crowd was wrong about the iPhone. The crowd was wrong about Amazon surviving the dot-com crash. The crowd is wrong so consistently that betting against the crowd whenever the crowd is unified in mockery of a physics-backed engineering decision is not a trading strategy, but a red. If you understand situations like this, then you will not be the one laughing at the two-seat pod with the funny doors. You will be the one looking at the range numbers and the efficiency data and the manufacturing approach and asking a different set of questions entirely. You will be the one wondering whether the mockery itself is the signal, whether the visceral negative reaction that most people have to the Cybercab's appearance is the exact same visceral negative reaction, and whether the people who are quietly accumulating equity in the companies building this future are going to be the ones telling their brother-in-law at the barbecue that they made the right call after. I am only joking, but seriously, you should look at the data before you join the laughter. The data is not hard to find. It is just buried under the noise, and the noise is always louder than the signal until the moment when it is not, and by then it is too late to act on what the signal was saying all along. Now, here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, and where most people who laughed at the Cybercab completely missed what was actually happening. Because what Tesla did was not design a car based on what people say they want. They designed a car based on what people actually do. And the gap between those two things is where entire fortunes are made or lost. The lead engineer on the project, a guy named Eric, dropped a statistic during the presentation that should have stopped every skeptic in their tracks, but it got buried under the avalanche of memes about the. He said that 80% of daily trips involve 2 people or fewer. 80%. Let that sit for a moment. Not long-haul family vacations. Not cross-country road trips with a car full of kids and camping gear. The actual boring, repetitive, daily reality of human movement is 1 or 2 people going somewhere and coming back. The commute to work, the trip to the grocery store, the drive to a friend's house, the school run with 1 kid in the back. That is the overwhelming majority of miles driven on this planet, and yet the entire automotive industry has spent a century optimizing for the edge case. They build cars that can carry 5 people and luggage for a week, because that is what you might need twice a year. And in doing so, they build cars that are wildly inefficient for what you actually need 3. This is not a small insight. This is the kind of pattern recognition that separates people who build things that work from people who build things that look good in brochures. If you understand that 80% statistic, then every single engineering decision on the Cybercab suddenly snaps into focus, and what looked like cost-cutting minimalism revealed it is physics responding to data. Take the battery. The EPA documents tell you the Cybercab has a battery pack of roughly 48 kilowatt-hours. For context, that is tiny by modern electric vehicle standards. Most EVs on the road today are packing 70, 80, 90 kilowatt-hours or more. The immediate reaction from the uninformed is to see that number and say, see, cheap, underpowered, they cut corners. But here is what they are not doing. They are not asking the next question, which is, how far does that tiny battery actually take you? And the answer, buried in those same EPA documents, is 418 miles. 418 miles from a 48 kilowatt-hour battery. That is not cost-cutting. That is an efficiency number that makes most of the automotive industry look like they are not even trying. It means the Cybercab is achieving somewhere in the ballpark of 8.5 miles per kilowatt-hour, which is so far beyond the current industry average that if a legacy automaker, how do you get that kind of range from that small a battery? You get it by designing a vehicle that is not carrying around the dead weight of assumptions. The Cybercab weighs just over 3,100 pounds. That is further light for an EV, and weight is the enemy of efficiency. Every pound you do not have to haul down the road is a pound that does not require battery power to move. The front-wheel drive configuration is part of it too, simpler, lighter, fewer components, less energy loss through a complex drivetrain. But the real magic is in the decision to optimize for two people. Because once you make that call, everything cascades. A smaller cabin means less material. Less material means less weight. Less weight means a smaller battery can go further. A smaller battery means lower cost, faster charging, less raw material extraction, a tighter manufacturing loop. It is not a series of compromises. It is a series of compounding advantages that all trace back to one honest question: what are people actually doing in their cars? And that brings me on to another detail that got almost no attention, but it tells you everything about the mindset behind this machine. The Cybercab has space for a wheelchair and a bicycle. Think about that for a second. A two-seat vehicle designed for urban autonomous transport, and someone on the engineering team made sure you could slide a wheelchair into the cargo area. That is not an accident. That is not a marketing bullet point. That is the signature of a design process that is looking at real human movement, not theoretical customer personas. How many people in cities need to get to medical appointments? How many people with mobility challenges are underserved by current taxi and ride-hail options, because the vehicle was never designed with them in mind? How many people want to drive to a trailhead, unload a bike, and ride for an hour without needing a giant SUV to carry that bike for 15 minutes? These are not niche use cases. These are the actual texture of daily life that the mainstream auto industry has been ignoring because it is easier to sell horsepower and leather seats than it is to solve real logistical problems. The wheelchair capacity in particular is a signal. It says that the design brief was not build the cheapest possible pod. It was build a vehicle that serves the maximum number of real trips. And real trips include people who do not fit the standard ergonomic assumptions of a sedan back seat. Real trips include a parent picking up a kid with a stroller. Real trips include someone going to a flea market and coming back with a lamb. The cargo space behind those two seats is not an afterthought. It is a direct response to the question, what do people actually carry when they are moving through their day? Now, let us talk about the manufacturing side, because this is where the pattern recognition extends beyond the vehicle itself and into the system that produces it. The Cybercab is being built using what Tesla calls an unboxed manufacturing process. Traditional car manufacturing is a linear assembly line where the vehicle body is built, then painted, then fitted with interior components, then married to the drivetrain, all in a long. Unboxed manufacturing breaks that chain. Different sections of the vehicle are built in parallel and then brought together in a final assembly step. It is a fundamentally different approach to putting a car together, and the reason it matters for the Cybercab specifically is that the vehicle's design simplicity, two seats, no steering wheel. When you eliminate the driver controls, you eliminate hundreds of parts. When you eliminate those parts, you eliminate the assembly steps required to install them. When you eliminate those steps, the unbox process becomes not just possible but dramatically faster and cheaper than traditional methods. The cost savings are not coming from using cheaper materials or paying workers less. They are coming from designing out complexity at the component level so that the assembly process itself can be restructured. It is the same principle as the battery efficiency. Start with an honest assessment of what is actually necessary, and then optimize ruthlessly around that truth. The result is a vehicle that can be produced at a cost that makes the economics of a robotaxi fleet viable, not as a subsidized experiment, but as a real business. And here is the thing that connects all of this back to the human pattern I was talking about earlier. The people who looked at the cybercab and saw a golf cart with fancy doors were not wrong about what they saw. They just stopped looking too soon. They saw 2 seats and thought less. They saw no steering wheel and thought incomplete. They saw a small battery and thought cheap. But what they missed is that every one of those decisions was not a subtraction. It was a response to the data, a response to the physics, a response to the actual shape of human movement on this planet. If 80% of trips are 2 people or fewer, then a 2-seat vehicle is not a compromise. It is a precision instrument. If a 48 kilowatt-hour battery can deliver over 400 miles of range because the vehicle is light and aerodynamically efficient and not dragging around unused mass, then it is exactly sized. If the manufacturing process can be restructured around the simplicity of the design, then the lower production cost is not a sign of corner cutting. It is a sign of systemic thinking. The mainstream laughed because the cybercab did not look like what they expected a car to look like. But expecting the future to look like the past is exactly how you miss the future. The early SpaceX employees who took equity instead of stable jobs were not betting on a rocket company. They were betting on a physics problem being solvable. The cybercab is the same bet applied to the problem of moving human bodies through cities. It is not about whether the car is pretty or whether the doors open in a cool way. It is about whether the engineering decisions align with the data. And if you actually read the EPA documents, if you actually listen to what the engineers are saying about trip patterns and weight and efficiency, you start to see that the alignment is there. It has been there the whole time, hiding in plain sight while the noise drowned out the signal. If you understand situations like this, then you will not be the one laughing at the thing that looks strange. You will be the one asking what the strange thing knows that you do not. And that question, the simple act of asking it, is where the edge lives. I will see you over there. But here is the thing about betting on real-world physics and human-scale behavior instead of hype. The payoff is not abstract. It is not theoretical. It shows up in people's lives in ways that sound made up until you see the documents. When SpaceX filed the paperwork for what could become the largest IPO in history, the numbers that leaked out were not just about Elon Musk's net worth or institutional investors getting richer. The story was about the engineers, the technicians, the welders, and the interns. 4,400 ordinary workers became millionaires, not founders, not early executives with corner offices. People who showed up solved hard problems and took equity instead of chasing the next hot startup. And it gets more extreme. 400 of those employees saw their shares cross the $100 million mark. A former welder named Juan Hernandez held 6,500 shares worth over $1 million. A former intern, Trevor Heiss, had accumulated more than 100,000 shares, and at the projected valuation, that stake was worth $13.5 million. Gavin Petty, another former employee, held over 50,000 shares worth $6.7 million. These are not lottery tickets. Nobody scratched a card and got lucky. These people committed years of their lives to a company most of the world mocked for a decade. They bet on a mission built around the unforgiving demands of physics, materials science, and orbital mechanics, not a pitch deck full of buzzwords. The SpaceX valuation is now estimated to exceed $2 trillion, with the IPO aiming to raise $75 billion. And the wealth did not concentrate at the top. It flowed down to the people who welded the tanks, who ran the simulations, who stayed late when the first 3 launches exploded, and the media called it a failure. They understood something the crowd did not. They understood that solving real-world movement problems, literally moving mass from Earth to orbit and back, creates value that compounds silently while everyone else is chasing. Now, you are probably thinking, okay, that is SpaceX. That is rockets. What does that have to do with me? I am not an aerospace engineer. I do not live in Hawthorne or Boca Chica. I cannot go back in time and join a startup in 2008. And that is the exact objection I want to address, because the pattern is not about rockets. The pattern is about identifying where real demand is concentrated in the physical world, then aligning your career or your capital with that, before the crowd figures it out. And the same company that produced the welder millionaire and the intern with $13 million is now applying the identical logic to a market that most people are still dismissing. The cybercab is a vehicle designed for 1 or 2 people. That is the entire market, not families of 5, not road trips with a roof rack full of gear, not contractors hauling lumber. The payload capacity tells you everything you need to know. The gross vehicle weight minus the curb weight leaves just over 600 pounds of capacity. That is enough for 2 adults at 200 pounds each, plus 200 pounds of luggage. That is it. That is the design envelope. And if you are the kind of person who looks at that number and thinks, well, that is limiting, nobody will buy that, you are making the same mistake people made when they looked at SpaceX in 2008. You are looking at the constraint and missing the concentration. Most car trips are 1 person. The vast majority of the remaining trips are 2 people. The entire automotive industry has spent a century optimizing for the edge case, the family vacation, the hardware store run, the carpool, while the core daily behavior, 1 person moving for. Tesla looked at that reality and designed a vehicle that strips out everything that serves the edge case and optimizes entirely for the dominant behavior. The result is a vehicle that is radically cheaper to build, radically cheaper to operate, and perfectly aligned with how people actually move. The market is not limiting. The market is concentrated, and concentration is where the wealth hides. This brings me on to the part where you stop thinking about this as a Tesla story or a SpaceX story and start seeing it as a template. The template is brutally simple. Find a massive daily physical behavior that everyone treats as too boring or too small to matter. Ignore the consensus that says the market is already served. Study the actual physics and logistics of how that behavior works. Then bet on the company or the technology that is building specifically for that concentrated demand, not the company trying to be everything to everyone. This is not about being smart. It is about being willing to look at what people actually do instead of what they say they want. And if you think this template only applies to cars and rockets, look at what is happening in other corners of the same ecosystem. Neuralink just demonstrated a patient named Owen Egan controlling a motorized wheelchair using only his thoughts through the N1 implant. The headlines focused on the sci-fi nature of it, brain chips, cyborgs, the usual spectacle. But the real signal is the same pattern. The physical problem being solved is brutally specific. A human being who cannot move their limbs needs to navigate a physical space. The solution is not a general-purpose brain computer that does everything. It is a direct neural interface for a wheelchair. That is the concentrated demand. That is the daily physical behavior that millions of people need solved. The market is not everyone who wants to merge with AI. The market is people who cannot use their hands and need to move across a room. That is a real problem with a real physics constraint, and the company solving it is the same one that produced the welder millionaire. The Boring Company is doing the same thing underground. The Las Vegas Loop is operational. Nashville is moving forward. Bastrop, Texas has active tunnel projects. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee showed up to see the progress himself. The consensus reaction is still mockery. Tunnels for Teslas, a subway but worse. A gadget barn. But the physical behavior being targeted is the same one the cybercab is solving above ground. 1 to 4 people need to move from one specific point to another specific point without stopping at 17 stations and without sitting in surface traffic. The tunnel is not trying to replace the New York City subway. It is trying to solve the specific problem of point-to-point movement in cities, where surface congestion has made the old solutions obsolete. The market is concentrated. The physics are simple. The mockery is the signal. Now, here is the part where I tell you this is not just about Elon Musk companies. The template works everywhere. There is a company called Monarch Money that built a financial dashboard. That sounds like the most boring product description in the world. Mint already existed. Every bank has an app. The market is saturated. But Monarch looked at what people actually do with their money and noticed a concentrated behavior. Couples argue about finances. They need to see the same numbers at the same time. They need a shared view that is not full of credit card ads and upsells. So Monarch built an ad-free, couples-focused financial dashboard. That is it. That is the entire innovation. They identified a specific daily human-scale behavior, sharing money decisions with a partner, and optimized for it. The result is a company growing quietly while the big players chase AI-powered robo-advisors that nobody asked for. The pattern is the same every time. You do not need to invent a new market. You do not need to predict the future. You need to watch what people already do, identify the behavior that is most frequent and most painful, and then find the company or the technology that is solving that specific thing without getting. The wealth flows to the people who commit early to that concentrated demand. The SpaceX welder did not need to be a visionary. He needed to recognize that moving mass to orbit was a real physical problem that was not going away, and then commit his labor to the only company solving it. The intern did not need to predict a $2 trillion valuation. He needed to see that the physics were real and the mission was not hype. You are standing at the exact same decision point right now, with the cybercab, with autonomous point-to-point transit, with the infrastructure being built underground and the neural interfaces. The crowd is still laughing. The consensus is still saying it is too niche, too limited, too weird. But the physics are real. The payload capacity is 600 pounds because that is what the dominant behavior demands. The tunnels are being dug because surface congestion is a physical constraint that software cannot solve. The wheelchair is being controlled by thought because spinal cords do not heal themselves and people still need to move. If you understand this pattern, then you will not be the one dismissing the strange product as a toy. You will be the one asking what the strange product knows about human behavior that the consensus is ignoring. And that question, the simple act of studying how people actually move through the world, is where the next wave of welder millionaires and intern multimillionaires will come from. Not from predicting the future, from watching the present more carefully than everyone else. And look, if you want to keep getting better at recognizing these patterns before the crowd does, make sure to subscribe if you want to grow your wealth. Okay, I am only joking, but seriously, you should do it. The whole point of this channel is to help you see the signal through the noise, and the more you train that muscle, the earlier you spot the concentrated demand that everyone else is too busy mocking to study. I will see you over there.